My wife cheated, got pregnant by her boss, and told me to sign as the father. 6 years of marriage. I thought it was steel. Right there in the delivery room, both our mothers standing on either side, the birth certificate on the table in front of me, I said, "Wait for the DNA." A rush order test. 72 hours. Either I'm the father, or I'm just the guy picked to pay for the next 18 years. The room froze. The hum of the air conditioner. The sharp smell of disinfectant mixed with newborn milk. Emily held the baby, forcing a smile, but her hands trembled. Her mother frowned. My mother stood still, staring at me, unable to believe what she'd just heard. I didn't shout, didn't throw anything. I just spoke calmly, but every word cut like a blade. "We'll know the truth before I sign." You might think I was cruel, but imagine, 9 months building the picture of a family, and at the last moment, a small doubt, big enough to shatter everything. 3 days from now, the truth will be out. And whatever the result, I know there's no going back. What would you do if it were you? My name is Mark Davis. I'm an offshore engineer working the oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico. It's not the kind of job you do halfway. You're gone for weeks, sometimes a month, then back for a short stretch before heading out again. Emily and I had been married 6 years. Springfield, Texas, our home, was quiet, safe. White picket fence, 2-car driveway, the kind of place people imagine when they picture settled down. We'd talked about kids for years, but timing never felt right. When we finally decided to try, it was like flipping the last puzzle piece into place. I thought we were unshakable. She had her friends, her hobbies. I worked hard, sent good money home. We had our small arguments, sure, but nothing that made me think the ground could give way under us. When she told me she was pregnant, I felt like life had just shifted into something better. I started cutting back offshore, moving into more office work so I could be home. I thought I was building a family. I didn't know the cracks had already started to spread. The months after Emily's announcement felt golden. We were repainting the spare room, soft yellow with little stencils of rabbits and foxes. I remember standing on the ladder, a paint roller in my hand, while she read out names from a baby book. We argued playfully over middle names, spent weekends at baby stores testing cribs and strollers. For the first time in years, I was home for dinner most nights. She seemed happy. I convinced myself that whatever loneliness she'd felt when I was away was gone now. By the time we checked into St. Mary's Medical Center, I thought I'd done everything right. The delivery was rough on her, but when they placed that tiny girl in her arms, Emily's face softened in a way I'd never seen before. Both our mothers hovered close, trading advice, fussing over blankets. I stood there quietly, soaking in the moment. If you'd frozen time right then, you'd see a man who thought his life was solid, unshakable. But the moment didn't freeze. It moved forward, straight into the sentence that would break it all apart. A nurse came in with a clipboard, followed by a woman from hospital administration. She explained the birth certificate process. Fill out the highlighted sections. They'd handle the rest. Mail us a copy in a couple of weeks. Routine, nothing special. Emily looked up at me from the hospital bed, cradling our daughter. "Honey, why don't you fill in the details? I'm a bit tied up right now." She smiled, like it was the most natural request in the world. I didn't smile back. "No, I think we'll wait. You can fill it out later, after the DNA test results." It was like the air got sucked out of the room. The hum of the AC suddenly felt loud. 3 of the 4 women in the room stared at me. My mother, Emily's mother, and Emily herself, eyes wide, mouths open. The 4th, the baby, kept nursing until Emily's sudden tension made her cry. Her mother's voice came first, sharp. "Mark, are you out of your mind?" Emily's confusion shifted to anger. "How dare you accuse me?" she shot back. I stood my ground. "Because there's a real chance I'm not the father." And I wasn't about to pretend otherwise. Emily's face went pale, then tightened into something between outrage and desperation. "What kind of woman do you think I am?" she demanded. Then, forcing a weak laugh, she added, "Oh, I get it. It's April Fools. You're trying to prank us." Well, it's not funny. Her body language told a different story. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her fingers kept adjusting the baby's blanket, over and over, like she needed something to do with her hands. "I'm completely serious," I said, my voice low but steady. "So you're going with the usual. Deny, deny, deny. My mother-in-law stepped toward me, her tone scolding. You've been so excited about this baby for months. Why are you suddenly acting like this? I glanced at her, then back at Emily. Maybe because I know you've been seeing someone else. I let the words hang in the air. Emily froze. For the first time, real fear flashed in her eyes. That was when I decided we weren't going to dance around this anymore. The truth was coming out, whether she liked it or not. I leaned forward, my voice sharpening. Brad Thompson, your boss. Emily's head snapped up. Absolutely not. I've never... She stopped mid-sentence like she'd caught herself before saying too much. Her mother Linda blinked, confusion clouding her face. Who's Brad Thompson? She asked, looking between us. A man your daughter spent a lot of time with, I answered flatly. And the man she was involved with while I was out working to keep this family afloat. Emily's denial came fast, almost too fast. That's a lie. I don't know who told you that, but they're trying to ruin us. I didn't flinch. Karen Miller told me, your co-worker. She knows all about Brad. She almost got pulled in herself until she realized what kind of man he is. And in trying to convince her he could keep a secret. Brad bragged about you. The color drained from Emily's face. In that instant, I knew I'd struck something real. And we were about to drag every hidden detail into the light. Linda turned to her daughter, her voice rising. Emily, is any of this true? Emily shook her head hard, but her voice wavered. Mom, no. Mark's just, he's upset. He's twisting things. I cut in. Am I? Because Brad told Karen you were together for 6 months, that you ended it only after you found out you were pregnant, and that you were hoping I was the father. Emily's lips parted, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted toward the baby, then back to me, like she was searching for some kind of shield. Linda stepped back, the fight in her voice gone, replaced with something closer to dread. Please, tell me you're not saying what I think you're saying. Emily finally spoke, barely above a whisper. Brad would never tell you that. He promised. And there it was, the slip. Linda's head snapped toward her, realization spreading across her face. I didn't need to say another word. That single sentence had done more damage than anything I could have planned. Linda's voice turned sharp. He promised? Emily, how would you even know what he promised unless you two... She stopped herself, like the truth tasted too bitter to say out loud. My mother, who'd been silent until now, stepped closer. Emily, if you have nothing to hide, then say it straight. Were you involved with him or not? Emily clutched the baby tighter, her breathing uneven. No, we were just friends from work. I took a slow step toward the bed. Friends? Friends don't call each other in the middle of the night. Friends don't keep secrets about a pregnancy. And friends sure as hell don't need to promise anything. Her eyes filled with tears. Mark, please, you're making a mistake. We can work this out. I shook my head. The mistake was thinking we could build a family on lies. The room went silent, except for the baby's soft whimpering. And in that silence I could feel it. She was running out of denials, and the truth was about to spill over. I didn't let the pause stretch too long. So let's stop pretending. Brad told me himself. Emily's head jerked up. That's impossible. He told me everything. I cut in, my tone cold. Not because he suddenly grew a conscience. He was under pressure, cornered, and bragged to the wrong person. I heard it straight from him. Linda's hands went to her hips. Emily, enough. I want the truth. Now. Emily's breathing quickened. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for a way out that didn't exist. You think I don't know about the nights when I was offshore? About the 6 months you spent with him, right up until 7 months ago? The timing lines up a little too perfectly, doesn't it? Her voice cracked. We were careful. No one was supposed to know. She stopped, realizing too late what she'd just admitted. Linda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. And for the first time since I walked into that room, Emily looked like someone who knew the game was over. My mother's voice cut through the tension. Careful? You call cheating on your husband for half a year careful? Emily's cheeks flushed deep red. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I shot back. You ended it when you found out you were pregnant, and Brad told you to make sure I never knew, because he didn't want the responsibility if the baby was his. Linda turned on her daughter, her tone sharper than I'd ever heard. Is that true? Emily's lips trembled, but she didn't answer. Silence is an answer, I said, my voice dropping low. You kept smiling in my face, decorating the nursery, letting me believe we were building something real, while making sure I stayed in the dark. The baby whimpered again, and Emily turned her attention to her, rocking gently as if she could block us all out. But there was no blocking this out anymore, because in 72 hours, science, not her, would decide if I was a father, or just the man she used to fool everyone. The nurse shifted uncomfortably by the door, sensing the weight in the air. My mother's arms were crossed, her jaw tight. Linda looked like she'd aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes. Emily finally spoke, her voice small. "Mark, please, you were so excited about this baby. We can still fix this." I cut her off. Fix what? A 6-month affair? The possibility that I've been decorating a nursery for another man's child? Her eyes brimmed with tears, but I didn't soften. If she's mine, I'll raise her. I'll be the best father I can. But if she's his... I let the sentence hang, the implication clear. Linda's head snapped toward me. "You can't just walk away from a baby." I met her stare. "I can walk away from a lie." Emily's hands tightened around the baby as if she could hold on to the life we'd had. But the truth was already out in the open, and there was no taking it back. I took a step back from the bed, needing space between us. "Maybe you should have your mom take you and the baby home," I said, my voice flat. "She can help you settle in, since I won't be around." Emily's head jerked up. "What do you mean you won't be around?" "Exactly what it sounds like," I replied. "Until those DNA results come back, I'm not playing house. I'm not pretending everything is fine." My mother's tone sharpened. "Mark, think about what you're saying. That little girl will have a father if she's mine," I interrupted. "And if she's not, Brad Thompson can take responsibility for his own child." Emily's eyes darted between her mother and mine, panic creeping into her face. "Brad and I never—" "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't start the denials again. You've already admitted more than you realize." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument, and for the first time, I saw it in her eyes, fear that she'd already lost me. Linda's voice shook. "Emily, please, just tell us the truth before this gets worse." Emily shook her head quickly. "There is no truth to tell. Brad and I never touched." "Then how?" I cut in. "Do you explain the fact that you spoke to him yesterday? That you told him about the baby?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She blinked hard, realizing she'd just confirmed what I'd suspected. Linda's gaze hardened. "You're still in contact with him?" Emily stammered. "He was just checking in." "No," I said. "He was checking to see if his secret was still safe. If you'd managed to keep me in the dark." My mother's eyes narrowed. "Emily, you didn't just betray him. You betrayed all of us." Emily's lips trembled, but she stayed silent. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. And I knew this wasn't going to end with words. The truth was going to need proof, and I'd already taken steps to get it. I took a slow breath, keeping my eyes on Emily. 2 days ago, I talked to Brad face to face. He didn't hold back. Probably thought he was bragging. Told me exactly how it started. How you met him at his place 3-4 nights a week while I was offshore. How it ended the moment you told him you were pregnant. Emily's knuckles whitened as she gripped the blanket. "He's lying." "Then explain this," I cut in. "He knew details no one else could have known. Dates, places. Even that you were hoping the baby was mine because you thought I'd stay no matter what." Linda's hand went to her forehead, like she was trying to keep her composure. My mother didn't move, her eyes locked on Emily. Emily's voice cracked. "Mark, No," I said, holding up a hand. "This isn't the time for half-truths. The test is already in motion. In less than 72 hours, we'll both know exactly what you've been hiding." Her shoulders slumped. For the first time, she looked like someone who knew the countdown had already started, and there was no stopping it. Emily's eyes darted between me and the baby, as if clinging to some invisible thread that might hold me in place. "Mark, please. You've been planning for this baby for months. You've read every book, built every piece of furniture. You painted the nursery yourself." I didn't flinch. "And I'll be a father if she's mine, but I'm not going to bond with a child who isn't. That's not fair to either of us." Linda stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You're talking like you've already made up your mind." "I have," I said. 3 days, that's it. Then we'll know." My mother's face was tight, her voice low. "And what if she is yours?" I looked at her, then back at Emily. "If she's mine, I'll take care of her. But don't mistake that for forgiving you. A DNA result doesn't erase 6 months of lies." Emily's lips parted, but she didn't speak. In that moment, the only sound was the baby's soft breathing, and somewhere beneath it, the clock ticking toward the truth. I straightened, my voice steady. "And Brad wasn't just seeing you, Emily. He's been through half the office, married or not. You weren't the first, and you sure weren't the last." Her brow furrowed. "That's not true." "Oh, it is," I said. "Karen told me, and she's not alone. Sarah Reynolds, Mike's wife, was before you. Lana Richards before her. Brad collects conquests like trophies, and you were one of them." Linda's face paled. "Mike Reynolds? The police officer?" I nodded. "Yeah, and Mike knows. He's been keeping quiet until after the baby was born. Didn't want to add more stress, but he's been watching just like I have." Emily shook her head, muttering, No, they're just making this up." "Are we?" I asked. "Because Brad bragged about every one of you. He even ranked you, Emily, and in his eyes, you weren't special. You were just convenient." Her face went still, the color draining, and I could tell, this wasn't just hitting her pride. This was hitting whatever was left of the story she'd told herself to sleep at night. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. "He ranked me?" I didn't soften. "Yes, like you were part of some list to prove how clever he was. He told Karen the one before you backed out when her husband got suspicious. Then came you, 6 months. You quit when you found out you were pregnant, hoping I was the father. Then he moved on without looking back." Her eyes glossed over, not with guilt, but with the realization she'd been disposable. Linda's tone cut through. "Emily, you let a man like that risk your marriage, your family." Emily pressed her lips together, but her silence was answer enough. I stepped closer, not to intimidate, but to make sure she heard every word. "He didn't even keep your secret for long. He used you as proof he could be trusted by telling someone else about you." Her shoulders trembled. "And the worst part?" I added, leaning just enough for our eyes to lock. "You knew the kind of man he was, and you still let him in." The truth was sinking in, not just for Emily, but for everyone in that room. Linda's voice broke the silence. "Who else did he tell?" I didn't hesitate. "Karen. She was scared Brad might brag if they ever got involved, so to prove he could keep a secret, he spilled every detail of his past affairs. Names, places, timing. He wanted her to guess who else he'd been with." Emily's eyes darted up. "And she guessed me?" I shook my head. "No." He told her outright. Gave her the timeline. Told her you ended things because of the pregnancy. He even said you were hoping I'd be the father, but didn't care enough to be sure. Linda's face tightened. "And you believed her over your own wife?" I met her eyes. I believed the dates, the details, the fact that they matched exactly with my offshore schedule. Emily's lips parted, but no defense came out. My mother's voice was low, controlled. "So while Mark was working to support you, you were spending your nights with Brad Thompson." Emily blinked hard, her grip tightening on the baby. And in that moment, she knew the story wasn't just mine anymore. It was everyone's. I took a slow breath, my eyes fixed on her. "I checked my work logs, Emily. First week of July, I was still offshore. I came home near the end of that week, and we made up for lost time. I thought that's when you got pregnant. I even bragged to the guys at work about it." Her gaze dropped to the blanket. "But what about the weeks before that? The nights I was gone? Did you have him over? Did you take him to our bed?" Her head snapped up. "No, never in the house. We were careful." She stopped, realizing how much she'd just admitted. Linda closed her eyes, shaking her head slowly. I pressed on. Careful enough to keep the neighbors from seeing his truck. Not careful enough to avoid getting pregnant. Emily's voice was small. "He doesn't use protection. I tried to lower the risk. Showers afterward." My mother's eyes widened in disgust. I took a step back, my voice cold. "You risked my health, our marriage, and a child's life, just so you wouldn't be lonely." And there it was. The selfish truth laid bare. Emily's chin trembled. "I was lonely, Mark. You were gone so much. Brad was there. We started talking, and before I knew it, we'd crossed a line. I knew he wasn't looking for anything serious." I shook my head. And yet you kept going. Her eyes flickered with something. Maybe shame, maybe defiance. When I suspected I was pregnant, I didn't want to stop until I was sure. I told myself if I was already pregnant, it wouldn't matter if I kept seeing him for a while. Linda's face twisted. You told yourself that? That's how you justified it? Emily swallowed hard. It was wrong. I know that now. I stepped forward, my voice low. You risked everything we had for excitement, for convenience. And when it got too real, you hoped I'd never find out. The baby stirred in her arms, oblivious to the weight of the conversation. I turned toward the door. 3 days. Then the test will speak for you. Emily's whisper followed me. What happens if she's yours? I didn't stop walking. Then I'll be her father, but I'll never be your husband again. I left the hospital that afternoon with my mind set. 3 days. That was all I needed to know which life I'd be living, one as a father, or one walking away for good. That night, in my apartment, I started making calls. My lawyer, first. We discussed splitting assets, protecting my accounts, and what child support would look like if the baby was mine. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. Next, I pulled the last of my personal things from the house. Clothes, important papers, anything I couldn't replace. I left the rest behind. Tom Miller called me just before midnight. His wife Karen had told him the whole story about Brad. He sounded more furious than surprised. We need to talk, he said. By morning, I was sitting across from Tom in a quiet corner of a sports bar. We weren't just two friends anymore. We were two men with the same enemy. I think Brad's done more damage than we even know, Tom said. I nodded. Then maybe it's time we find out just how deep it goes. And in that moment, I knew. Brad Thompson's days of hiding were over. Over mugs of stale coffee and the low hum of early morning sports highlights, Tom and I laid it all out. He told me about the night Karen came home pale and shaking, admitting Brad had tried to get her alone after a work function. When she refused, Brad bragged about his past conquests to prove he could be trusted to keep things quiet. My wife's name had been part of the sales pitch. I told him about the hospital, the birth certificate, the 72-hour countdown. We both sat back, realizing we were just two names in what was probably a much longer list. You think there are others? He asked. I know there are, I said. Sarah Reynolds, maybe more. Brad's sloppy, he talks too much. Tom's jaw tightened. So what do we do with that? I stared into my coffee, thinking about the months I'd been gone, the nights Emily had chosen someone else. We start talking to the other husbands. Quietly. We share what we know. Tom nodded slowly. And then? I met his eyes. Then Brad learns what it's like to have no place left to hide. By that afternoon, Tom had already lined up 2 more calls. Mike Reynolds, the cop whose wife Sarah had also been linked to Brad, and Don Coleman, whose wife Jessica had suddenly started working late. We met in the back room of the same sports bar, away from curious ears. Mike came in wearing his uniform, still on duty, eyes hard. Don showed up last, his expression a mix of anger and humiliation. I went first, laying out my timeline, what Brad had told Karen, and how it lined up with my offshore schedule. Tom followed with Karen's story. Mike added details about how Sarah's work hours had changed, how she'd gotten careful with her phone. Don listened, his fists clenching tighter with each word. You're telling me this guy's been working his way through married women in our town and nobody's done a damn thing about it? That's exactly what I'm telling you, I said. The room fell into a heavy silence. And in that silence, I realized we weren't just swapping stories anymore. We were planning something. Mike leaned forward, his voice low but steady. If this was just about my marriage, I'd handle it quietly, but Brad's made it a pattern. He's not stopping unless someone makes him. Don's eyes narrowed. So what are you suggesting? Nobody answered right away. The air in that small back room felt thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. Finally, Tom spoke. We can't go after him reckless. That's how people end up in cuffs. But there are ways to make sure a man like Brad feels the consequences. Mike nodded slowly. I'm not talking about anything that'll put us in prison, but there are lines we can cross that he won't see coming. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just sat there, letting the weight of the conversation settle in. Brad had taken something from each of us. Respect, trust, family. And whether we admitted it aloud or not, we were all thinking the same thing. It was time to take something from him. We didn't make a plan that day, at least not one we could be accused of later. But the tone in the room shifted. Mike tapped the table with 2 fingers. If he's got other women on the hook, their husbands deserve to know. We start there. Tom added, and we make sure Brad knows we're watching. Every move. Don gave a tight nod. Men like him think they're untouchable. He needs to feel the walls closing in. I sat back, thinking of Emily in that hospital bed, holding a child I might not even be connected to. Brad hadn't just stolen from me. He'd humiliated me in front of my family, my community. Fine, I said. We warn the others. But understand this. Once that test comes back, I'm done holding back. If she's not mine, I'm cutting her out completely. And Brad, I paused, letting the words sink in, will know exactly what it's like to lose something he thought he owned. The 4 of us left that bar without shaking hands, without promises. But there was an unspoken truth between us. This wasn't over. 3 days later, the envelope was in my hands. I'd told myself I was ready for either answer, but my fingers still hesitated at the seal. Linda answered the door when I arrived at Emily's. Her eyes were red. "She's been a wreck," she said quietly, then stepped aside. Emily was on the couch, the baby in her arms, her face pale and tight. She looked up at me like I was holding her fate. In a way, I was. I tore the envelope open. My eyes went straight to the line that mattered. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. I let the paper fall to my side. "She's not mine," I said flatly. Linda's face crumpled. Emily's mouth opened but no words came out, just a trembling inhale that broke into sobs. I didn't move toward her, didn't reach for the baby. I just stood there, letting the silence fill the space between us. For 72 hours there had been a sliver of doubt, a chance I might stay. Now that chance was gone, completely. Linda sat down heavily, her hand over her mouth as if she could hold back the sound of her own grief. Emily clutched the baby closer, rocking like she could shield herself from the truth written on that paper. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but it wasn't clear what she was sorry for. The betrayal, the lie, or just being caught. I didn't ask. I'd stopped needing her explanations. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," I said. "The divorce papers will be delivered this week. You can stay here for now. My mother might help, and Linda, I'm sure you'll be here." Her sobs grew louder, but I felt nothing. No urge to comfort her, no pull toward the child in her arms. That bond had been severed before it even had a chance to form. Linda looked up at me, eyes pleading. "Mark, she made a mistake." I shook my head. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a choice, over and over again." I turned toward the door. I didn't look back when Emily called my name. Some things didn't deserve a second glance. By the end of the week, the news had spread through Springfield. People didn't say it outright, but I could feel it in the way conversation stopped when I walked into a room. Brad Thompson's name was on everyone's lips, quietly, carefully, but it was there. Tom called me first. Mike told Sarah, and Sarah told 2 of the other wives. It's moving fast. I wasn't surprised. Good. The more people know, the less he can hide. Mike confirmed what I'd suspected. Brad had been involved with more women than we'd counted. At least 2 other husbands had ordered paternity tests of their own. "He's got a pattern," Mike said, and now every man in town's starting to connect the dots. I hung up the phone and poured myself a drink. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, just a steady, cold certainty that Brad's days of playing the charming predator were numbered. He'd taken too much from too many people. And in a town like ours, that kind of debt always comes due. It happened faster than I thought it would. Just 3 days after the whispers started, Brad was found on the sidewalk outside his upscale subdivision. A passing jogger spotted him, bound at the wrists, half-conscious, groaning in pain. Word traveled quick. By that evening, I'd already heard the details from Mike. 3-pound sledgehammer, he said over the phone, his tone somewhere between grim and satisfied. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were aiming for. I didn't ask questions I didn't want answered. Brad told the cops he remembered the doorbell ringing in the dark, then a jolt of pain, maybe a taser, maybe more than one person. He claimed one of them said something about staying away from another man's wife before everything went black. Officially, the investigation went nowhere. Too many suspects. not enough evidence. Unofficially, most people thought Brad got exactly what was coming to him. I wasn't about to argue. Some debts don't get paid in court. When I first heard about the hammer, I didn't think much of it. Just another piece of gossip swirling around town. But a week later, one found its way into my hands. I never asked where it came from. Never needed to. It was a 3-pound sledge, its handle worn smooth, the metal head scuffed and darkened, heavy enough to end a career in one swing. I kept it tucked away in my apartment closet behind an old duffel bag. I told myself it was just an object, a reminder that Brad Thompson wasn't untouchable anymore. But it was more than that. Every time I saw it, I felt a strange sense of control, like I'd reclaimed something he'd stolen from me. I didn't plan to use it. I didn't have to. Just knowing it was there was enough. Brad was healing somewhere, probably plotting his next move. And I was here, holding proof that for once, the scales had tipped in my favor. I didn't keep the hammer out in the open. It stayed buried in the back of my closet, but I knew exactly where it was, the way you know where you've hidden something you're not ready to let go of. Months passed. The divorce finalized. The house was sold to a young family who would never know the lies that had seeped into its walls. Emily moved back in with Linda. I didn't see her again except across a lawyer's table. Brad kept his head down. I'd hear pieces of news, his medical bills piling up, lawsuits from other women's husbands, child support cases he couldn't dodge. But even as life moved forward, that hammer stayed. It was a weight I didn't need, but couldn't release. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about holding on to the one thing in this mess that felt like power. Then, one autumn night, standing on the deck of an offshore rig, I finally understood. Power wasn't in holding on. It was in letting go. The Gulf air was cool that night, sharp with salt and diesel. I leaned against the lower rail, staring out at the black water stretching forever. My windbreaker flapped in the wind, but my hands stayed still in my pockets. The hammer was there, heavy against my side. I'd brought it without thinking, the way you grab a wallet or keys. For a long time, I just stood there, listening to the steady churn of the rig. Memories flickered. Emily's face in the hospital, Linda's voice cracking, Brad's smirk in my imagination. I pulled the hammer out, feeling its weight one last time. Cold metal, worn grip. The kind of thing that could change a man's life in a single swing. For months, it had been my proof of what I'd lost and what couldn't be taken from me again. But now it felt like an anchor. Without ceremony, I swung my arm and let it go. It arced once, then disappeared into the dark, swallowed by the sea. The sound it made was small. The release was not. When the hammer sank, it took more with it than I expected. The weight in my chest eased, like I'd been holding my breath for over a year, and finally let it out. I stayed at the rail for a while, watching the ripples fade until the water was still again. There was no flash of clarity, no sudden joy, just space. Empty, quiet space, where anger used to live. Back in my cabin, I noticed the closet looked different without it. Cleaner, lighter. I hadn't realized how much I'd been shaping my life around that hidden thing, always knowing it was there. The next morning I felt the difference. My coffee tasted the same, the work was the same, but I wasn't carrying the same weight into it. Brad's name didn't echo in my head anymore. Emily's face didn't follow me into every quiet moment. Letting go hadn't fixed the past, but it had made room for something else, something I hadn't thought about in a long time, the possibility of a future. I met Lily a few weeks later, at a friend's backyard barbecue. It was one of those Texas autumn afternoons, warm sun, cool breeze, the smell of mesquite smoke drifting over the fence. She wasn't flashy. No loud laugh meant to draw a crowd, no heavy perfume. Just a calm presence that made you notice her without knowing why. We ended up at the same picnic table, paper plates balanced on our laps. She asked about my work, and I gave her the short version. Oil rigs, travel, too many nights away from home. She didn't pry, didn't ask about Emily, though she had to know. Instead, she told me about her own life, her job at the library, her quiet mornings with coffee and a book, her stubborn old dog who refused to walk when it was cold. There was an ease to her, like she wasn't trying to impress anyone. When the sun dipped and the air cooled, we found ourselves still talking. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking back over my shoulder. I was looking at someone new. With Lily, there was no rush to fill the silences. We could sit across from each other in a diner booth, sipping coffee, and it felt complete. No undercurrent of suspicion, no need to watch my words. She didn't press for details about my past, but she didn't flinch when small pieces slipped out, like why I preferred to meet in quieter places, or why I hesitated to talk about family. In return, she shared her own scars. A marriage that had ended quietly but painfully. The way trust, once broken, seemed harder to rebuild than anything else in life. We weren't pretending to be unmarked by what had come before. We just weren't letting it define the whole picture. One evening, as we walked out of the library where she worked, she paused under the streetlight. "You don't have to tell me everything," she said, "but you can tell me anything." It wasn't a promise to fix me. It was something better. Permission to be exactly where I was and still be seen. Trust didn't come back in a single moment. It came in pieces, like rebuilding a fence after a storm, post by post, nail by nail. With Lily, those pieces started small, letting her pick me up from work, handing her my phone to show a photo without feeling the urge to guard the screen, letting her into my apartment without worrying about what she might find. She never asked about Emily, but when I did talk, she listened without rushing in with advice. She didn't tell me to move on or let it go. She just let the words sit between us, giving them space. One night, we were sitting on her couch, the dog snoring at our feet, a movie playing low in the background. I caught myself thinking about the hammer, not with anger, but as a reminder of how far I'd come since the night I let it go. I turned to her and said, "I don't think about them as much anymore." She smiled softly. "Good. That means you've got more room for what's next." For the first time, I believed her. 3 years have a way of softening the sharp edges. I still live in Texas, but my life looks nothing like it did the day I walked out of that hospital room. I took the headquarters job I'd turned down twice before. Steady hours, no offshore trips unless I choose them. My apartment became a home. Lily's coffee mug sits next to mine in the cupboard. I haven't seen Emily since the divorce. Everything between us runs through lawyers, even the final paperwork. As for the baby, Connie, she's Brad's responsibility now. I don't check in, don't ask, don't linger on what-ifs. Brad? Last I heard, he's still limping through life, child support cases stacking up, real estate tied up in legal knots, reputation burned beyond repair. I don't celebrate his downfall, I don't need to. The hammer is gone, the rage with it. The man I was then wouldn't recognize the man I am now, and that's the point. Every so often, something will catch me off guard. A newborn's cry in a grocery store, the smell of fresh paint, a glimpse of a yellow nursery in a magazine, and for a split second, I'm back there. Back in that delivery room, the paper on the table, the air so thick with silence you could choke on it. But the difference now is that it passes. The memory comes, stings, and then moves on, leaving me standing in my present instead of drowning in my past. Lily knows when it happens. She doesn't need to ask. She'll just slip her hand into mine, grounding me in the here and now. I've learned that healing isn't forgetting. It's living with the echoes until they fade into the background. Brad and Emily will always be part of my story, but they're not the headline anymore. The headline is this: I'm still standing, still moving forward, and I've got someone beside me who wants to walk that road too. It's strange how life can feel both heavier and lighter after you've been broken. Heavier because you carry the lessons. Lighter because you've stopped carrying the people who taught them the hard way. With Lily, the road ahead isn't mapped out in detail. We don't talk about forever in big, sweeping promises. Instead, it's the small commitments. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, fixing her old porch swing together, learning each other's rhythms, that make me believe in what's next. There's no pretending the past didn't happen. We both have chapters we'd rather not reread. But instead of closing the book, we've decided to keep writing. Sometimes, late at night, I'll catch myself listening to her breathing beside me, and I realize the rage, the suspicion, the constant readiness to fight. They're gone. I'm not scanning the horizon for what could go wrong. I'm watching the road in front of me, and for the first time in years, it feels wide open. I used to think my story ended the day I walked out of that hospital room, that everything after was just aftermath, a life built from scraps. But I was wrong. The real ending wasn't in losing a marriage, or proving a betrayal, or watching someone else's life unravel. It was in the quiet choice to rebuild, to take the pieces that were left and make something better. even if it looked nothing like what I'd planned. I don't define myself by what Emily did, or who Brad was. I define myself by the fact that I'm still here, standing, breathing, living a life that's mine. Lily's hand in mine is proof enough. Not proof that the past is erased, but proof that the future doesn't have to be ruled by it. Some scars never fade, but they don't have to. They can remind you of what you survived, of the lines you'll never let anyone cross again. I'm not the man who lost everything. I'm the man who chose to rebuild. And maybe that's the only part of the story worth carrying forward.